Hey there, welcome to the Posit Data Science Hangout. I'm Libby Heron, and this is a recording of our weekly community call that happens every Thursday at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. If you are not joining us live, you miss out on the amazing chat that's going on. So find the link in the description where you can add our call to your calendar and come hang out with the most supportive, friendly, and funny data community you'll ever experience. Can't wait to see you there. I am super excited today to announce our guest, Nick Wan. Nick is the Senior Director of Baseball Analytics at the Cincinnati Reds, but he's also a data science streamer on Twitch, and he's been streaming on Twitch for many, many years. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and also what you like to do outside of work for fun that's not streaming.
Yeah, thanks for having me at the Data Science Hangout. I'm Nick. I am at the Cincinnati Reds. I've been there since 2017. I came in as a data scientist and I have helped build and build out the department there. I oversee, depending on how you count it, anywhere from 11 to 15 analysts, data scientists, data people. And we work to support the team on the field. So it's not business related. We're not working with ticketing. It's nothing like that. It's how to produce runs. It's how to prevent runs, how to develop players. All using data and quantitative analysis and strategies to do that. So that's my day and a lot of my nights. And when I'm not doing that, I'm streaming. So I'm over on Twitch streaming under Nick Wan underscore data sci. I've been doing that since 2016, end of 2015 actually, but 2016.
Wow, long
Um,
time.
Really long time, really long
Yeah.
time. And we stream all sorts of data science stuff, anything from small projects to big projects. We do game show stuff. We do all sorts of different events. We've done conference coverage. We've done a lot of different things. So right now we were working on NFL draft related stuff, and the NFL draft's tonight. So that's been kind of fun. And there's several people I see in chat from stream. So hello, chatters. Um, for fun, I don't know. Don't have I don't have a lot of free time. So I guess when I'm not I guess when I'm not doing streaming or data science stuff, I'm doing probably like in the gym lifting. So um
That counts. That counts. All right. Well, I was hoping that you could give us a little bit of context. You've already given us a little bit more, but I don't know anything about baseball. And I really don't know anything about baseball analytics or sports analytics. And we are all coming from a bunch of different industries here. So could you help us understand what type of data you use, what like where the data comes from, what exactly you do with it, what decisions get made based off that data, stuff like that.
yeah.
Explain it to me
The
like I'm
date.
five, Nick.
Okay. So we'll start out with tabular data and pose data. No, it's so the data, it really is like a lot of the data that people see uh when you go to like ESPN, or if you're using any of the different sports data aggregate websites like Pro Football Reference or Sports Reference or Fangraphs. So you get like that box score data where at the end of the game, if you're like, I don't know who reads newspapers, but at the sports section, you have like the score and how many things happened and something that contextualizes the game and gives a reader an ability to kind of catch up on the game without actually having to watch it. So you can take all that data. They've been collecting box score data since the late 1890s. So you have all this data, and then ultimately, depending on how detailed that box score data is, you could actually start building out predictions of whether it's runs scored the next game or whether it's how many hits are going to be scored the next game or achieved the next game, all sorts of different things. Just given like very simple things like counting stats that you know people track just by watching the game. So um, the data since the 1890s has evolved, as we can all imagine, with the advent of technology. So you have stuff like the physics of the pitch. So how fast the ball goes, but also like the spin rate on a ball. So if you have a baseball, like depending on how much force you apply to it, you could actually spin it, and the RPMs actually give different value to the quality of the pitch. You can have differences in the environment. So if you're in higher altitude, like in Colorado, versus lower altitude, like in San Francisco, you can have differences given the projectile of the ball. Um, and you use all this information to ultimately either predict events or uh, evaluate players. So you could evaluate players by the events that happen in the game using data. So is a pitcher, for instance, throwing really hard? Is there a particular inning where their velocity of the pitch starts tailing off? Are there particular strategies you can employ depending on the quality of your pitchers? For your batters, are they swinging a bat in a certain way? Are certain batters matching up against a certain team optimally? If not, is there something to do with the lineup that you could optimize the amount of at bats a particular player might get throughout a series, depending on the team matchup? So the data itself, whether it's starting relatively small or you have all these physics type layers that we could capture through like whether it's computer vision or some sort of like radar tracking, you could actually build pretty complex models to describe the events that are happening in the game, and ultimately not just quantify them, but have pretty good predictions on what's happening, whether it's in game at the pitch level or whether it's at the season level.
Awesome. Okay. I feel like I have a much better idea now. I feel like you mentioned injury stuff. Like, do you do any, I don't know, motion capture or analyzing the actual like training and stuff to help prevent injuries? I'm asking because like I know that other sports departments and teams that I've talked to, that a lot of their data analysis push is actually on that side, preventing injuries.
Yeah. So we do have skeletal data back in the day, and still to this day, you see like people would like wearing styrofoam balls in like a motion capture suit against a green
Yeah.
screen or something. So given the advancements in computer vision, if you set up high frame rate cameras, enough of them, you can kind of get that motion capture markerless now, so you don't need the foam balls or anything. So at all major league parks, there's 12 cameras that are set up that capture the events on the field, and several of them are focused on whether it's the pitcher or whether it's the batter or different players on the field. And that's capturing 29 points, things like your head and your neck and places on your wrist and elbow and down your spine and stuff. And we could actually end up quantifying like the biomechanical space, as they call it. So the skeletal data that comes in, you can now quantify not just like how fast you throw it, but like how much torque or how much force you're putting on your elbow or your shoulder. And tracking that can actually help prevent injury or at least curb injury.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, there was an anonymous question in Slido actually that sort of asked this. It's like what kind of mechanisms just all the hundreds of cameras in the game allow for these detailed measurements and stats of in-game metrics? I think that question also kind of applies to other stuff. Like, how do you catch all of these things? Whose job is it to watch all of these things and like record everything? But, people have been recording baseball stats forever.
Yeah, it's luckily not hundreds of cameras. It's like maybe a dozen cameras. So you have the 12 cameras that do the motion capture, and then you have like maybe another like 8 cameras. Several of them are like broadcast cameras. And then you have some that we set up for coach use. So when we're trying to evaluate plays and stuff. Um, uh, and most of it's just computer vision. So, like you said, there's been watching baseball for a long time. A lot of people are, I mean, the league spends money on people who are official scorers, so they're tagging events that happen. And all of that actually can be treated as label data. So if you're doing any like classification modeling, you could take certain events and say, yeah, that this is this label. And then as play develops, computer vision models can actually start tagging those events given what's what kind of motions are happening, what kind of where the ball is in space, um, all of that kind of stuff. And then
Wow,
there
I
is
had
some
no idea.
manual, yeah. So there is some manual process, manual review, and shout out to everyone at the advanced media team at the league who spend a lot of time trying to quality assure, quality check. I'm sure if I didn't give a shout out to Tawny and the group, I'd hear about it at one of our meetings. So shout out to those at the league office helping us with the data side of things.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm a data scientist and I had not really thought about the fact that computer vision would be useful in this scenario, but of course it would be, right? Well, we have a billion questions in Slido. So I would love to hop in and ask some of them, especially because some of them will help us build a little bit of context, I think, around who you are and what you do. Um, there was one, actually, there were a couple about streaming that I think it would be nice to cover because a lot of people don't really know what streaming is. So Nick streams on Twitch and he also has a Discord server. I'm going to actually put a poll in the Slido, which I just started, and hopefully you can see it, that you can go answer, asking you if you've ever tuned into a Twitch stream or used Discord, so that everybody can see the results of that. So the questions were around like, can you tell us a little bit more about streaming, but also was it scary for you when you first started? Like, how was it received in the beginning? What's your community like? How has it evolved over the years? Stuff like that.
Yeah. The streaming, so I did my grad school at Utah State. And At the end of it, when I was working on my dissertation, I was kind of inspired. Someone who, one of my friends, when they were trying to finish their PhD, they had like this tracker of how many words they typed on their dissertation. A lot of people in this chat probably know it's Chris Albin. He did this whole thing of like how many words he put into his dissertation, and people kind of kept accountability over him to finish through uh, his progress in tracking in that sheet. So I decided to, I'm in my dissertation at this point, trying to finish it. Um, and so rather than doing it this, Google Sheet tracking way, I decided to just stream it. So for, several months, I would just go live writing my dissertation. It was literally me just screen sharing a Word doc in my lab. And People would come in, not a lot, as you can imagine, of people were like super interested in like very esoteric neuroscience work. But it was good because the people who were interested, they some of those folks ended up sticking around for longer. So talked about my dissertation, kept me honest about putting words on paper and rewriting things, explaining things. And then when I finished that, uh, finished writing, I still like streaming because the people who were coming into chat were fun, and it was kind of like, nice social outlet in the middle of the day for me. So continue to stream, mostly just streamed like random stuff. I used to stream like generative art, and like back before like there was this whole like large language model thing, like We would make like bots that talked like other people and like deployed bots on Twitter and stuff. Shout out to Crystal Lance who helped me in all those early streams. Um, so we would code all this random stuff and then started doing NFL work because NFL started releasing these like gigantic play-by-play data sets and I ended up messing around with it. And then a bunch of people ended up coming in for that. And then they realized, like, oh, this guy actually is also a sports analytics person uh, who isn't, you know, shy about sharing like what materials are being used and what methods are being used and all of this stuff. So um, that was like 2016, 2017. And then ever since then, been streaming random data science projects and sports analytics projects. I saw someone in chat ask about cricket data science. And while we haven't had much cricket data available, we've done a lot of different sports. We've done bull riding, we've done
Oh,
F1,
wow.
we've done a lot of esports data. We did an entire thing on the Bachelorette. Um, we
And you
did
also stream game shows.
yeah, so we have data science game shows. So I think back in 21, our most popular stuff was called Sliced, and that's on YouTube now in VOD form. But we would stream once a week. It would be four data scientists, and they would have 2 hours to basically complete a Kaggle competition that we made. They had no idea what the data was. They would get the data like 5 minutes before the clock started at 9 p.m. and they had from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. to put together a yeah, that's right. Greg's in chat. He was in Sliced. But we had 16 data scientists. A lot of people in here probably know a handful of them. We had Julia Silge was on there, and we had D-Rob was on there. Jesse Mostapek was on there. Um, so a bunch of people. Greg was on there, of course. Um, and 16 data scientists and they competed against each other twice and then we had a finals and it was pretty big. It was like maybe the turnout for this hangout, but like rather than talking about data science, everyone was like picking sides and like cheering on people. It was pretty cool. So
That's the game show I need in my life. When I found Sliced, I was like, "Oh, wait, this is so fun." And like I never watched it live. I just watched it on YouTube. But I also discovered Vizbuzz, which is even more nerve-wracking, I think, for me, which is like Nick spins a wheel and the wheel randomly picks a data visualization. And they're like great data visualizations by talented people. And then participants have to recreate this live. And you get like 25 or 30 minutes to do this, right? So I do Tidy Tuesday slash Piety Tuesday every week with friends, and I spend about 30 minutes creating a visualization. It's hard. It's really difficult. It's so fun to watch. So, how did Vizbuzz get started? Actually, you know what? We got to jump to questions from the chat, y'all.
okay.
Because we could talk about Vizbuzz and stuff forever. There's another season of Vizbuzz coming up in June. So,
That's
everybody, if you are interested in doing a Vizbuzz competition, please get in contact with Nick or I. Okay.
true.
So, um, I asked about medical data applied to models, mild versus moderate injuries, or fitness reports. That is our top question. I'm going to count that as answered because I feel like we have talked enough about how the motion capture works and how that is relevant to what Nick does. But Maxims asked a question which I really like, which is how do you convince coaches and players that specific prediction is accurate and reliable? So this is a question about like communication and trust.
Yeah, we actually were talking about this over the last like week on my stream. There's a lot of the time where you finish a project and you hand it off, or you have a product or a report or a dashboard and you hand it off, and uh, there isn't much communication as to like what went into it. It's just kind of here's the analysis, right? So we went through like the past week of like, say you create this like quality of pitch model, this value of like how valuable a particular pitch would be. How would you communicate that to a coach? And so uh, for like a couple streams, we had people say like, all right, who's your favorite pitcher? We put it in, and then here's what the pitcher's arsenal of pitches are. They throw a fastball, a curveball, a slider, a changeup, and here's what they plot on this value map. What would you recommend them do for each pitch in order for that to in order for their pitch, say a fastball, to be more valuable, given the model recommendations? And so we went through the process of like, oh, well, the model says move it, 4 inches higher. So they just had to throw it 4 inches higher. It's like, well, it's not that easy, right? Like the coach is now going to come to you and say, well, the only ways to do that is if you get them to change their mechanics of throwing, or maybe change an arm slot. Maybe they have to do something differently that they haven't done or haven't needed to do for like 20 years because they're a professional baseball player in the major leagues now. So it's really difficult sometimes to communicate like what is objectively uh, the best thing for a player versus like what a player might actually be able to accomplish. So how to build that trust is like, on one side, yes, like always try to stay true to like the most accurate interpretations of your data and what you should do to accomplish the best outcomes. But you also should at least try to start seeing it from the perspective of the stakeholder or the perspective of the end user, right? The person you're applying the data to. So if you tell a pitcher like, hey, your slider could use 4 more inches of horizontal break. It needs to sweep a little more for it to be even more valuable. They're just going to ask you, how do you do that? And if you don't know, if you're just like, I don't know how to do that, just do it, I guess, you lose a lot of credibility in the communication side. And it's like, you don't want to lose that because you've spent so much time putting in so much effort into your model and your analysis, right? So that sort of communication layer is its own project, and I try to emphasize that. Like, you got to step into the shoes of the person you're talking to a lot of the time. Like, what does it mean to move a pitch a few inches? Like, is it a grip change? Like, are they going from like a grip like this to like up the seams a little more? Is it an arm slot change where like that's a bigger mechanical change and it doesn't just affect a slider or a fastball, but every single pitch that they have? Is it something where like they're going to have to be like pronating or supinating their arm or their wrist more in order for spin to be a particular way, for the ball to move a particular way? Is that going to cause some warning or issue for injury? So you have like so many more layers than just move the pitch a few inches. That doesn't necessarily come out in the analysis, and the best way to build buy-in is like to level, right? To level with the coach, to level with the player of like, I understand that this is a difficult thing. And if we do want to get better at this one thing, this is the recommendation. And at times, I think another thing, just thinking about last night's stream, because we were doing this, someone was like, yeah, we should move it more, horizontally. But really the better answer was like, actually, you should probably move it like more vertically, not because it's in the better direction. It's actually still in like a bad area, but it's better than where it was. It's relatively much better. Even though it's not in a good, valuable area, it's less bad, right? And sometimes less bad is the best we can do. And like, I know in the world of quantitative analysis, like we always want to be best, and like uh settling for less than like optimal is like frustrating at times, but sometimes that is the answer. Like, it's better to just be better, and sometimes you
It's
can't
better
be
to just
best.
be better. Yeah, you know what? There's a question in Slido from Marcos that's kind of along this line where like not every team is making the playoffs every year and winning. Not every team is making the World Series. And like, I would love it if he could ask that live. So let me see if I can find Marcos here to unmute him. Marcos, would you like to ask your question live?
Hello, sure. Yeah,
Hey.
I mean, I'm a big baseball fan, and I think fans and I think the general public, a team is judged by, wins and losses. Did they make the playoffs? The Astros were considered to be very analytical. They won two World Series. Everyone says, well, the analytics must have worked. Everyone, the people who were successful got moved on to other teams. So, but obviously, a team's success is not just dependent on the analytics team. There's the coaching staff. There's the owner's budget. There's just a general manager listening to you all and like actually signing the players you want to sign or whatever, or drafting who you want to draft. Or how does the organization evaluate the analytics team's performance and success if it's like if you can't just use, well, the team's record is better now than it was 5 years ago or whatever?
Yeah, department KPIs. It's unlike other industries where you could be evaluated on like, does your ROI improve given your marketing budget or something? It's hard to quantify or evaluate like, is an analytics team improving the organization as a whole? And I think the best ways to evaluate whether or not that's true is a couple things. Like the first thing is analytics not only provides like quantitative analysis, but it also provides like guardrails, right? A lot of the time, analytics isn't about like what's the right answer, but it's about the less wrong answers. So if you're able to eliminate being in the gutter and you're just on the fairway the entire time, um, like that's a lot better, right? So one evaluation metric is uh, are you able to showcase that throughout all of these departments there are like statistical or analytically driven boundaries of like this is like a red flag zone or this is a no-go area, and if so, like what are the reasonings, what is the quantitative analysis behind that, what is the objective reason why we shouldn't do certain things, uh and usually those things, like 9 times out of 10, coaches believe too. They're like, oh yeah, like those are bad things, we shouldn't do that. Or like a staff member might say like, yeah, like those are things we should avoid, sometimes we do them, but now I know we should never do them. Um so setting up more boundaries, I think, is one way to evaluate like the especially the width, the reach of analytics is like how much involvement is there in like the discussion of what is the go zone versus the no go zone. And I think that's like a pretty easy thing not just to achieve in baseball or in sports, but like really any company, right? Like I while I've been at the Reds for a long time, I've also worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken as their manager of data science for 2 years, and it was similar there too. Like the object is to increase profit margins and do it in a time where people weren't really going out to eat. So how do you improve that? Uh, one of the behind the scenes things that happened at KFC was stop uh, buying things that aren't profitable, which are like sounds easy, but data really helped sell that story of like, yeah, let's replace wedges with fries. Let's make sure that pot pies are a seasonal item because no one's buying pot pies in July. Uh, let's pivot towards more chicken sandwiches because they sell faster, they're easier to stock. Uh, and that ended up being fairly impactful for that brand for that period of time. So uh, being able to just set up boundaries is like one way to show like, yeah, analytics is doing research, they're able to implement like rules of the road for a lot of different departments and decision making tools, and then from there, once that gets adopted, I feel like then you can kind of start working towards that like idea of analytics should be predicting the right thing as opposed to suggesting what you shouldn't do. So those just generally some thoughts on how to measure an analytics reach.
Awesome. Thank you. I kind of hadn't really thought about ticket sales as a metric. Like baseball teams have to make money. I don't know. I'm thinking more as you were talking about baseball as a business. And I'm realizing in a lot of these questions and answers, there are parallels to business, right? And like we have to make these same appeals about yes, that would be great to change, but it doesn't make sense for us to be able to change it, or it would be really hard to change, or this would be really difficult to measure, or oh, that's not actually possible. Um, so yeah, so many parallels with business. Thank you, Marcos, for the fantastic question. We have a bunch of questions in here. We're at the halfway mark, so I would love to ask a context building question again, which is what data tools do you use? Because usually this comes up a lot sooner and we haven't gotten there yet. So, what languages do you and your team work in? What tools do you use? What IDEs? Do you use things like Snowflake, like Databricks? Do they talk to your other data tools? Give me the rundown if you can, as much as you
Sure.
can.
Oh yeah. Real quick, people are asking about the Vesta board. It is a Vesta board. And then people in chat, there is interaction with like you could go into the Twitch chat and like make it say things if you want. But
Oh,
I'm
that's so
sure,
fun.
yeah, I'm sure someone in chat will probably go into offline chat and just do it in a second, but it's fine. Um, so the tools we use, our team is split. Half of us are doing all of our work in R. Actually, the majority of our repo is probably R. And then the other half are in Python. And then we're always in the database, and we're accessing database through whether it's SQL or whether it's Spark, um, depending on the environment we're in. The environment that we're mostly using is our Posits Pro Enterprise thing. So everyone everyone just kind of loads up the workbench there, and they go to town. And then if we're not in there, if we got to go on more of the data engineering side of things, our data engineering team works mostly out of Databricks. So we jump in there and help them out when we can. Um, and then,
Awesome. I know we have some
yeah.
Databricks Plus our users maybe in the chat or maybe they're not here, but yeah, lots of like Databricks plus R people. um and then when you are saying your database, is that accessing data from Databricks? Like, do you use catalog?
Yeah. So, our we try to centralize everything in a data warehouse through Databricks, so that's a lot of it. There are other places we store data just because of availability of resources. So we have a Snowflake database that also helps us prioritize certain data feeds for other departments. For example, when you're playing a game and you have a game every day, data needs to be available, but not just the data, but the resources to run all the reports and generate all the things that the coaches and the players need for the day. So if you're competing for resources all in the same cluster, it's hard to really guarantee execution times. So we've moved some of that to its own resourced environment through Snowflake. So we have some of that. And then Databricks is where a lot of our dev work happens. So our projections team, our innovations team, our insights team, they're all building out not things on the daily basis, but like reworking the back end update to a certain new model or a certain new versioning of something. And that's all happening probably through Databricks and through Databricks on the back end for the data, and then whether it's in Posit or whether it's going through a Databricks IDE.
Cool. So you are a true polyglot data manager.
Yeah,
You-
I not by choice, but by necessity.
Do you do most of your own work in one or the other, or do you switch back and forth?
I try not to touch the code base these days. I feel like
Okay.
it's like bad luck for me to go in there and like, maybe I look like a PR every now and then, but I don't think I have there, I don't know how many people relate to this, but as I've grown with this department and now that I lead it, like just people are so smart and I've hired absolutely like some of the most talented people and they could code circles around me now. So it's more of a detriment if I'm touching the code base if I than if I don't let, if I the people I hire, they're going to be able to do things faster and better than I. So
I
I don't
think
touch
people
it too
can
often.
relate. Yeah, because I'm seeing lots of smiles and nods and some reactions. So yes, I think some people can relate. But that's wonderful that you hire people that you know are good at their jobs and then you trust them to do that. That sounds like an amazing manager, Nick. Okay, well we have lots and lots of questions about baseball. Y'all, I don't even know what some of these questions mean because I'm not a baseball person, but um let's see who we can bring in here. Brian asked two questions. Brian, I'm going to pick one because you got two in here. And I am really interested in the second one, which is, has the legalization of sports betting affected teams' data practices at all?
Uh, no, not really. I think like if anything, it's probably grown the availability of data in the public space. Uh, while my day job is working with a ton of data for a baseball team, on stream, I try to promote as much public work, whether it's in baseball or other sports, as possible. And maybe the number one thing that I'm noticing with like an influx of like uh, gambling companies and sports books and that kind of stuff entering uh, the mainstream sports space now. Um, it's probably like the availability of data that's grown in the public space more than that it's affected the private sector, the on the team side sector. So you have like access to way more data and way more things than you've ever had before. That's not just like a sign of the times in terms of what people want. Like I don't know how many people are out there casually looking up the spin rate of fastballs, but like if you build models and you're trying to like bet against certain things, maybe some of these things are going to be helpful for you and your predictions on whether it's like daily fantasy or whether it's like some sort of like money line stuff. And that's not just baseball, but that's football too. That's really all sports. So I think like there's more of an impact there. Like for me, and for people who work on teams, we're always going to have more data than like not just the gambling companies, but the public, right? So while we've been talking about all this stuff in like pose data and biomechanics data, there's really not much of that. Really, there is none of it available through the league right now, other than what's provided to the team. So really only certain like unless you work for a team, you don't really have access to like every single data point that you can. And like that's even like just thinking about it from the major league point of view. You have 7 layers of minor league development where players are trying to become major leaguers, and you have several layers of amateur, and then different levels of international baseball, and that all has data as well. So none of that really is available to the public. So internally, we've always had more data than like sports books. We've always had more data than the public, and seeing more data in the public now more than ever. I think that's actually more of a sign of like what the influence of gambling is doing to baseball from the data side.
Interesting. There's a question in the Slido that's kind of along these lines from Tony. Um, Tony, would you like to unmute and ask that? And I will highlight it in Slido so it goes to the very top and stick it in the chat.
Sure.
'Cause-
Thanks, Libby. Hi, Nick. I'm from Boston, big baseball fan. Lately I've been hearing a lot about exit velocity for hitters, and I'm wondering how much you use that versus other hitter-based statistics to evaluate. And I'd also be interested to know if you were part of the evaluation for Ellie De La Cruz, who's probably one of the biggest stars, and certainly a big star from Cincinnati standpoint.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Tony. The uh the that first part in terms of exit velocity, there's both exit velocity and there's the new stuff right now with bat speed. So shout out to Alan Nathan, physicist who's a professor emeritus at University of Illinois, right? Chat, you could correct me if I'm wrong. But he's done a ton of work for the last 2 decades on exit velocity and the impact of hitting on the baseball and projectile motion of baseballs. And a lot of his work is about not just exit velocity, but how fast you swing and the transfer of energy from the bat to the ball. And stuff like coefficient of restitution and all drag factors on the ball, backspin versus no backspin produced on the ball, all sorts of different things on the ball that you could think of in terms of projectile motion. And it is a gigantic factor. And it is an important factor when it comes to evaluating batters. It's how hard do you hit it? And then can you produce a speed of your bat that allows you to hit the ball effectively harder. So there's a lot of that. And we actually just did a CAG competition over the last 2 months. I put one together for my community using bat speed data as one of the features. So MLB releases, like I said, they release a ton of new data now. And over the last year, they release a ton of new bat speed data. And in the coming weeks now, maybe this is a leak, I don't know, but it's okay. Tell Mike and Tom to yell at me, it's fine. There is going to be more new data that's coming out through Baseball Savant, which is the main data resource for the public when it comes to baseball. So be on the lookout for new data feeds. They showed off some of this at a Sabre conference, the Sabre Analytics conference in March, and some of it's going to be related to attack angles, so like the angle of your bat as you swing through the zone, more bat speed metrics, more biomechanics metrics for batters. So there's going to be this entire batter analytics revolution coming soon, and I'm pretty excited to see what the public is going to come up with when it comes to all this new batter stuff that's going to come out this year. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like Joey was just saying, Data Science Hangout, breaking news.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. One more thing about Ellie. Yeah, I was there at 2018. They evaluated Ellie. That was our international group. That was one of the first years I was working with the international group. I wasn't there to evaluate Ellie, nor was I a part of any Ellie evaluation. I take zero credit for Ellie. All credit to our international group at the time. Richard Fernandez, who's over at the Dodgers now. A big shout out to him. He actually was a big help to some of the stuff I do now. It's not just the analytics department I lead, but I also am the head of our psychology and cognition department. And so he helped a good amount helping establish that with me. So
awesome. Okay, I think that we partially covered some questions from the Slido, but let me ask them to you to make sure we cover them, because one of them was, there's been a lot of talk about bat shapes this season. Do you think that customized bat shapes for players is going to be the future of offense? Have we touched on that at all?
No, that's torpedo bats. Yeah, a lot of people talking about torpedo bats. There's a lot of good research out there right now. Vivian is one of the people out there who's spearheading a lot of this torpedo bat physics research with Alan Nathan and Tom Tango in the public space. I do recommend perusing Blue Sky for some torpedo bat physics research.
Okay, cool. I will. Arsenis asked that question about, have you seen the effect of torpedo bats in the data yet?
Oh, I would say, well, I'll answer it this way. Baseball is like over 150 years old. And every year there's always some technological advancement in the equipment, whether it's the shoes or the gloves or the bat. And so I think every year you could probably see the effects of some sort of equipment change, but is like the torpedo bat going to be as revolutionary as like, I don't know, a wood bat versus an aluminum bat? I'm unsure. I mean, like a batter is swinging with so much force. I'm unsure how much a particular bat is going to affect like the application of force onto a ball.
This is a physics
Whether
question
it's
that is above my pay grade.
yeah, but Alan Nathan and Vivian, they're who are both in the public space doing this kind of work. They have they have some pretty good thoughts. I think it's not necessarily about how much harder you're going to be able to like let the ball fly, but it's actually the amount of area that your bat's going to be able to cover to produce those speeds. So we shouldn't think about it as like adding on as a multiplier effect. We should think about it as like you get more coverage on your bat and you could do it more consistently, probably.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I just looked at the clock and we somehow have 10 minutes left. That's wild to me. This has gone by so quickly. And I want to get in a question that is more of on the advice side, right? Like the career advice side. And Emily asked a great question. I'm going to ask if she wants to unmute and ask her question live because it's on the advice side.
Hello, sure. My son is currently interested in being a sports data analyst when he grows up. Side note, he's 13, so that may change. But do you have any advice for someone looking to get started in the field? How to get into sports analytics?
Yeah. I mean the two easiest things. One, like if they have an interest in quantitative analysis of some sort, learning how to code sooner than later is always good. If they're already dabbling in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever spreadsheet service they use, that's a really good start. On my YouTube, there's a boot camp I put together. When was it, chat? 2 years ago. Seven videos, completely free. It takes you from using Excel to being able to manipulate stuff in pandas. And there's like free data, and there's an entire like boot camp homework section, and you could use the Discord to get homework help if you want. But being able to at least do things quantitatively and like get used to that, whether it's like playing fantasy, like whether it's fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, fantasy football, trying to quantitatively approach playing something like that. That's a pretty good space to get started. A lot of people end up doing that first, and then I'd say the other side is like to just get like to get in is the more you have a project in mind, the more projects you could complete and put on, whether it's GitHub. Being 13 with a GitHub's kind of crazy to think about, but there's a lot of them, a lot of people with that now.
Yeah.
But being able to put projects out there and just say like I went from beginning to end with a project, and it was how to evaluate whether like when to draft a running back in fantasy football, when to draft a quarterback in fantasy football, like some questions that might have a lot of resources out there already, but coming up with your own answer using your own methods, that shows a lot of initiative for hiring managers, I would say. And that's not just for sports, but that's, I think,
for everything. Yeah. Follow your curiosity. I would say like pick a thing that you're interested in and have a question about. And if he really loves sports, like go find the data, see if you can answer it, even if it's imperfectly. There was a great question in the chat from Amiko to the chat, which is there a place to go for sports data, whether it's baseball or others? So I really encourage everybody to go pop some things in the reply to Amiko's question for resources, because there are a lot of like data packages in R and Python that contain a lot of like prepackaged data. So you don't have to go scrape it yourself. There are some APIs I know that exist. So everybody help Amiko out. I would love that. Emily,
for
thank you so much
our
for that
baseball
question.
R, sorry, for
Oh, go
our
ahead.
baseball R is is probably the best resource for like pitch by pitch, play by play data. Shout out to Bill Petty, who helps
Great.
maintain that.
Arsenis and Trevin just added those. So thanks y'all.
Trevin, yeah, he's a chat regular.
Welcome to chat regulars. I have seen a few of them who are also like, people who have competed on some of your shows. So I love seeing that. I feel like they're celebrities that I'm getting to see in my chat. We have so many more questions and we only have like 4 minutes left. So I would love to ask Joey to unmute and ask his question. Joey, I got to find you and unmute you here.
Also, while
Hey.
you're looking for that, you could always check my stream out, twitch.tv/Nick Wan Data Sci. But yeah, go for it, Joey.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Nick. And this is like so cool. I really like your streams. I'm wondering what methods or tools or cool math has been kind of invented or developed in sports analytics and then like exported to other domains. Like, this is a silly example, but I can see like the kind of methods that model out like what's a really valuable player could be used in like workforce analytics to say like, what's the marginal contribution of a team member to, you get it. Are there examples like that?
Oh yeah. I think the easiest example from baseball to other this actually happened at KFC for me. There's this idea of park factors. So in baseball, to hit a home run, you gotta hit a ball really far over a wall. But that wall isn't standardized. It's not like all walls are like 400 feet. So some walls are like as short as 320 feet, and some walls are as far as 421 feet. So the idea of park factors really makes team construction, like what kind of hitters you want, what kind of pitchers you want, pretty different from team to team based on the park they play in. So if you think of like the effect of the park, how hard you got to hit a ball, how far you got to hit a ball to get a home run or to just get a hit, you can actually apply like the park factor value or at least the methodology to all sorts of things, right? Like at KFC, we did. I started doing not just like park factor analysis, but really like zip code analysis. Like, are there certain zip codes that have a predisposition to wings than other zip codes? And this actually ended up going as far as to suggest we should actually reduce sales of wings from the majority of the United States, except for KFCs that are within a certain radius of SEC schools in the South, because that's really like where the profitable margins are for selling wings. And so if you apply this like idea of like what you need to do to hit a home run, what you need to do to sell wings to make them profitable, you could actually apply that to a lot of things. I actually end up doing that with bull writing too. So when you have all this data, not just the writers, but also the bulls, you could actually put together like do certain bulls add to certain writers' scores. And so there are certain bulls that actually, if you ride them, your score does improve by this certain margin. And for other bulls, they would like decrease your score. And talking to certain cowboys, they would say like that's completely true because some bulls look like they're hard to ride, but they're easier to ride, and that gives you a higher score. Whereas some bulls are just very difficult to ride, and they do it in kind of an ugly way, and that actually like decreases your score. So it's pretty interesting when it comes to like applying something like from baseball to another field. I always think I'm taking so much stuff from other fields and applying it to baseball, but I'd say park factors is probably one of those things that I've seen in a lot of places that they might not call it park factors or environment factors, but I see it as park factors. I'm like, oh, that's park factors.
Amazing. Joey, this is a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking it. And thank you so much for the millions of questions that we could not even get to. We got so many. So Nick, I am going to make sure that you get all of those questions and hopefully you have access to the Slido and you can see them. And I will also say I put a word cloud in the Slido because data science is not one thing. Data analytics is not one thing. The word cloud is like describe your work in 3 words or less, no cheating. So everybody should be able to see the results of that word cloud after you do it. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap this up. We have 1 minute left, so I will tell everybody, don't forget that you can save the chat. Go up to the top right, click the little 3 dots and save chat if you don't want to lose a lot of the resources that you saw today. Thank you so much to Nick. And next week we have Trevor Fry, lead data analyst at Pinterest. So stick around for that next week. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. This was so much fun. I could have done this for another hour. Everybody go hang out with Nick in his stream.
Thanks, Libby, and thanks everyone at Posit for letting me come on and help host today. And yeah, for those who wanted to ask questions and you couldn't get them now, feel free to join us. And we start the stream usually 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you're available then and you want to ask questions, join us in chat, and I could always get your answers over there.
Yes, and if you want to participate in something that's a live game show like Vizbuzz, get a hold of Nick or me, and maybe we can help you do that. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to hang out for another second so everybody can grab the resources that they want to grab. But goodbye. Feel free to drop off. I will see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me on my birthday week. Tomorrow's my birthday.
Happy birthday, Libby.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.